So you have this idea, of something causes something else. X causes Y. And in the example that we were just talking about, this idea that if you have a lot of connections, hopefully, you'll get a job. How do we determine if there's actually a causal relationship? So that brings us to this notion of correlation versus causality. So correlation just refers to an association between two different factors. If X changes, so does Y. If you know more people, you might have a higher chance of getting a job. Or I just saw on the news this idea of vegetarians actually live, 6 to 9 years longer than non-vegetarians. So there's a correlation there. The question is if it's actually a causal relationship. And causality refers to a relationship in which change in X actually results in the change in Y. So when we talk about X and Y, basically those are referring to the different variables. X is the independent variable. It's independent because it's the one that's actually causing the change in Y, the dependent variable. Its change is dependent on the other factor, so that's what that refers to. So it could be, eating habits is X, the independent variable that actually affects longevity, the dependent variable. So it's key to understand that correlation and causality are not equivalent. Simply because something is associated with another change doesn't mean that it actually causes that change. But you actually do need correlation if you want to show that there is causality. If there's no association, then something can't be causing something else if they're completely unrelated. So to determine whether or not there's a causal relationship, you need these three things. When I was memorizing them in grad school, we used the acronym ATN. A referring to association or correlation. Is there a relationship to begin with? Two is time. T is time order. Does one precede the other? In order for something to cause a change in something else, it has to come first, right? And then finally, non-spuriousness is N. And that means that it isn't caused, the change in Y, in the dependent variable, isn't being caused actually by some other variable like Z, for instance, that you aren't even considering in the relationship. So non-spuriousness means that it's not being explained by some other variable. So using this example, when people start eating ice cream more, that causes people to wear shorts. There is an association for sure. There's a correlation. People eat ice cream, there's a rise in people that wear shorts. But is it a causal relationship? Does eating ice cream cause people to wear shorts? And then obviously, the answer is no, because it doesn't fulfill the three things. So yes, there is a correlation. Time order, we're not quite sure. We don't know if people are wearing shorts first or if they're eating ice cream first. We don't know what the time order is. So already one of the determinants is not being fulfilled. And then lastly, non-spuriousness. There actually is an alternative explanation, and it's probably that the weather is getting warmer, right? People want to cool down. They don't want to wear clothes that cover up their body as much, so they're eating ice cream and they're wearing shorts. So it's a spurious relationship. And to have a double negative, it's not non-spurious. So then, therefore, you do not have a causal relationship here. And those are the things you have to consider when people make causal claims, right? And they do this in many arenas of society and politics especially. Um, People, politicians, teachers, they make these sorts of arguments to support the claims that they have, um, or their interests, or to suggest particular types of behavior. The question is, are these claims that they're making always valid? So when you think about causality, and try to see if these relationships are actually valid, um, I think it tends to break down common sense, because sometimes things may seem right, and they might be, but you can't take it for granted that they are. Um, you just need to be more critical about it. So, for instance, this idea: if you study more hours, you'll get higher grades. Or this notion that marijuana is a gateway drug, and if you smoke pot, then you are likely to do harder drugs. So then thinking about applying it, are these causal relationships? Is there a correlation between hours spent studying, and GPA? Studies have shown that yes, people that study more hours tend to get higher GPAs, but that there is actually a diminishing return on the hours. As hours get more and more and more, GPA doesn't always get higher, and sometimes it actually decreases because people might be just studying too much, and not having a balanced sort of like mental health situation. The time order, we're not really sure. I mean, obviously you study before you take tests and get your grades, so that's there. Non-seriousness. Are there other factors you think that actually help people get better grades or higher GPAs than studying? And there could be many other factors that go on with that. So the causal relationship there isn't as strong. So for marijuana being a gateway drug, is there a correlation? I'm not really sure. I think that the number of marijuana users is significantly higher than those that use some of the harder, I guess, street drugs. Time order is something that you have to consider as well. And then non-seriousness. Is there an alternative explanation for why people will use, so-called harder drugs? So again, these causal relationships that people say and that they sound like they make sense, that they're common sense, they have a little bit more fragile foundation of causality than we might otherwise assume. So causal claims aren't just about research. They actually do have real consequences in, I guess, the real world. They can affect individual decisions, they can affect social policy. So for instance, beliefs that marijuana is a gateway drug can prevent it from being, I guess, decriminalized in states like Connecticut or many other states in the United States. Video games, the idea that video games can lead to violence later on in life, that has led to a grading system. So parents know how much violence there is it rated E for everybody, or for mature audiences based on the violence level. Um, Having a college degree, the assumption that having a college degree leads to having better qualifications for a job, can impact salary decisions or hiring decisions of companies. So there are real consequences to these causal claims that people make on an everyday basis.